Dana Dubois, welcome to the Right About Now podcast.
Thanks, Jonathan. It's great to be here.
So excited to meet you, sort of in person.
Right.
But we've been talking on Substack, and I'm kind of new to Substack, so this whole kind of like Substack
Me
world.
too.
I'm like, right? It's like a little bit exciting, but also like, oh, another thing I have to learn. Gen Xer, we always have to learn new stuff, right?
Oh my
We're
God.
constantly
Yes.
learning.
How long have you been on Substack?
I've been probably like a year, but I haven't really been on it. Like I'm now learning that Substack almost acts like a kind of Instagram replacement or an X replace. Like you can just look at the feed and it gives you a lot of great stuff. Like I always thought of Substack as a way to, share your writing, maybe even monetize your writing somewhat. But I just never really got. I create so much all day. I'm sure you feel the same way. I create a lot of content all day, and it's just last thing I need is to create even more content that nobody's paying me to make. So I've been putting it off a little bit. I will be honest with you, but I think it's really cool actually, and especially if you get a good group of, followers and people that are, in your on your wavelength. It's actually a really kind of might replace. I'm hoping it will replace my Instagram feed because my Instagram feed just depresses me. And
I
so,
not
yeah,
gonna
tell me
lie,
about
I'm a little obsessed with Substack. And you've got a head start on me. I've been active on Substack for a little over a month.
Okay.
So I'll give my background
Yeah,
sort
please
of
do. That's always my thing.
backwards.
So yeah, let's
Yeah.
do your background backwards from Substack. We'll start at the present and then we're going to trace how you got to where you
Yes.
are.
Yeah. I have always had a corporate big job, and I think that's part of why this article we're going to talk about may hit me a little differently. But I work in marketing for different tech companies up here in Seattle over time, and I've always had a creative outlet. So in the aughts, I founded and ran a music website with one of my best friends called Three Imaginary Girls. It was Seattle's sparkly indie pop press. It was so much fun. Yeah, never made any money. It was a labor of love. And when I had my first child, that quieted. It went on and existed very quietly. It's still up. And then wanted to get back to having a voice online again and a creative outlet and writing. Words have always been my passion. And a couple of years ago now, was facing down do I want to go on Medium or on Substack, or do I want to launch my own website? Do I want to rebirth Three Imaginary Girls? What do I want to be doing? And was in such analysis paralysis. I don't know if you've gone down this path too. And then I had a job interview for a role I thought I wanted that was a writer role, and I had to have writing samples right away. And so I had friends who worked at Medium, and I was like, fine, I'll just try Medium. Popped a few things up there, and I'll make that long story very short. Found my community super quickly.
Wow.
And that was right when they had launched the Boost nomination program almost a couple years ago. And it was essentially manual editorial curation meets machine learning algorithmic boost. And so I built a following of readers very quickly and frankly monetized very quickly. Ended up launching a few publications of my own there, became a Boost nominator myself, have been very immersed in that ecosystem. And so I was like, I don't need Substack. I don't have time.
Right.
With parenting and work. And really it just let me write without having to worry about all the technical aspects, and also to kind of curate and edit these publications. There have been changes at Medium, and earnings are down, traffic is down, and so people are leaving, and they're all coming to Substack. And I was like, I guess I finally have to go learn what Substack's all about. I'm kind of obsessed, Jonathan.
Well, it's really, yeah. What do you like about it? Tell me
Oh my God, it plays to all of my strengths and obsessions, maybe, because there's writing, right? Long form writing. But there's short form writing, like the entity formerly known as Twitter, and I'm dead naming it on purpose. So there's that whole immediacy and being able to share content, but not on a Zuckerberg owned platform that's just trying to annihilate you with ads. It's all content. I am loving podcasting and going live and video. And I'm loving how you can collaborate. You can't co-write an article on Medium, and it's only writing. So this is just opening up so many different ways of storytelling
Yeah.
and also of discovery. On the other hand, it's so hard to be new and
Yeah.
be
Like any
like,
of these things, right?
yeah, look at me. I'm writing all these oh so clever notes. And then it's like, my best
Three.
friend likes it. And
Yeah.
that's,
Three likes. Well, I mean, honestly, it wasn't until I've had a few somewhat popular, posts there. But again, I haven't made a science of figuring out, and I subscribe to some of these Substackers that are actually like, this is how you become big on Substack. But then I don't really want to do it that way either, because that's like gaming the system, and I don't love that. I don't know. I never know how much to game the system versus how much to just do it organically. I mean, you're a
I
marketer,
know.
you have to play the
Yeah.
game somewhat.
But here's the thing, though. This is a very Gen X thing, too, I think. So Lawrence Winterman is my lifelong best friend and also my co-conspirator. We founded Gen Xe together, which is one of the two publications that I have on Medium and on Substack. And that whole authenticity thing, right? Are you on LinkedIn too? I assume you are.
I am.
Because most of us are.
Yep.
You know how like LinkedIn was years ago was when they started becoming more of a social platform. There was some good longish form writing on there, but it very quickly devolved to those like there's funny nicknames for them that are I'm spacing what it is right now, but there are these very insipid like I saw someone suffering and it made me think,
Yeah.
it's very predictable. And I'm worried that the notes are going to go that way. I'm already
Yeah.
starting to see patterns of like,
Patterns.
someone like this to let me know that you can see this and like 500 people will like it. I'm like,
I don't get that. There's a
I
lot
don't
of
get it either.
yeah. There's a lot of Substacks where it's like, if I'm looking for like-minded people, and if you're a writer and like this, and the algorithm will find us and put your thing in my comments. And again, then somebody gets 500 likes. I'm like, they didn't. That's not even a store. Like, how did my thing, which actually did pretty well, has like 250. So I'm jealous of the 500 likers, because that one I actually spent time like thinking about and writing. But I hear you. So yeah, they have to be careful.
Yes.
I mean, the problem with these things, and I think we're going to talk about this, but this is part of being adaptable. Like the platforms do change. Right now, this is the platform of the moment for writers. I encourage all my writers that I teach to go on Substack, try to start, and we know that in 2 or 3 years, this is probably going to change. Sorry, Substack. It probably is going to change. I mean, there's going to be something else that'll come out.
Dude, they're going to sell out and it's going to suck.
It's going to suck.
I'm being a little tongue in cheek, but also.
Right. So Gen X to say that, but it's true.
Yes.
They will sell out. And it'll suck, and then it'll become like a MySpace, and then it's going to become like just like MySpace became Facebook, became we've been, but that's the thing. That's the thing that, and I don't want to jump too far ahead into the story, but that's the thing that drove me a little bit crazy about the story. It made it seem as if Gen Xers don't know that happens, and that we're not sort of savvy to the fact that you have to keep pivoting and being kind of on top of this stuff. Now, I'm glad I'm talking to you, because there are definitely people our age. And I think you're younger than me, but we're in the same. And by the way, when we say Gen X here, when we say Gen X here, I'm going to take Jennifer. I have Jennifer Twenge. She's amazing. I'm sorry, she's Jean Twenge. She wrote this book called Generations. I had her on my podcast. She is like an expert in the generation, world, and an academic expert. And she says Gen X is they were born between 1965 and 1979.
Yes.
Which I think that seems
That's correct.
Correct. Which makes me a little bit on the early side of the Gen X thing. I probably should just say my age, but whatever, I don't want to.
1970. I'm not
All right,
shy.
I'm
about
67. All right, so you're a
Okay.
little bit younger than me. But anyway, point being that we're still in that sweet spot.
Oh, yeah.
But the fact is that why I like having you on is that you're cool. First of all, you're from Seattle, so you're going to be hip and cool, and you're going to know about the latest music, and you're going to know about technology and stuff, right? I mean, for the most part. But the fact that, you are probably more typical than what this article would have you believe, is if like Gen X is like, we just got frozen in time at some point, and like, the digital revolution passed us by. So that bothers me, but we're going to get into that. Tell me a little bit before we do that about Gen XY. This is your new project that you started with your best friend Lawrence, and what is
Yes.
it? Like, what was the origin of that? Like, why did you get it?
Yes. And it's actually pronounced Gen Xe.
Oh, I'm sorry, Gen Xe.
It's an adjective.
You're right. Okay, I'm very Gen Xe. Okay.
Yes, we are very Gen Xe. And when you create something new like this, you should have it's blank and it's really easy. We don't have that yet. And we may never. So because this is a podcast, I get to talk for a while. Because it's going to follow on what you were just talking about of, are we typical Gen X? So Gen Xe is a certain, we call ourselves the minority of the minority generation. I thought Gen X was awesome until I started really diving in and meeting Gen X people online. Gen X kind of like a big chunk of us, we suck. We aren't even what that article was.
We're worse. Oh
We're
God.
way worse. I mean, we gave the White House to Trump. By
You,
far,
you,
we were the generation that did the worst. It was
okay.
like we broke, I think, 54 or 56% for Trump. So you know how this was so funny because I was like, no, Lawrence, we're amazing. We're the adaptable ones. We're the this, we're the that. I then, Facebook suggested I join a group called Gen X Singles. And I was like, okay, I have to join this and see what's up. Oh my God, there's not like, there's thousands of people in this group and they are almost universally horrible. The men,
Yeah.
especially like
The men are
they are,
terrible.
they are
Is that,
conservative. They're
is
all
that
very
because as people
small
get older,
town.
they get more conservative anyway? Like, is it us or is the fact is where we are in our lives, right? So
It's
we're in our
both.
50s now. Yeah.
So here's the thing. A lot of Gen X folks never left home. I mean, like every generation, they never left home. Or they didn't go very far and they got very settled in their ways. Gen Xy, the people we're describing are people like us, the ones who probably left where they grew up, which was probably a suburb, and we migrated to bigger cities. And at the time, they all felt open to me, other than maybe New York and San Francisco. I felt a little priced out there, but everything else was like the world's your oyster. We got to these cities and we helped build them into these creative and technical hubs that they became. And it was so there's so many layers into this, right? Like I'm a woman. The opportunity chasm between my mom and me is immense.
Hmm.
Like she came of age where women went to college to get their MRS degree, and if they became a teacher, a nurse, or a secretary, and they probably stopped working after they had a baby, like my mom, and that
The
was
Mad
it.
Men. That was the Mad Men era.
Yes,
Yeah.
you married by 20 to 22, or that was it. So with Gen X, like I have a younger brother and it was like you're both going to college, you can major in whatever you want. Like I never felt any different for being the girl. And I did. I found a major, I moved to another city, and then there was this segment of Gen X, there was this delayed not delayed, a very prolonged adolescence, right? Like people did not partner off and did not have babies until much later or never. You know, there were like kickball leagues and like proms, especially, there's a diminishing but large queer population in Seattle. And so if you followed them, there were the bingo games and the gay proms and the whatever it was, like it's so many shows, like so many bands, and like people between their 20s to 50s playing in bands and going out. So it was a lot of fun. Some of us settled down and had kids, like I did, some didn't, but we helped build these cities. And now we're at this interesting turning point where my hypothesis, and Lawrence's, is that we are a bellwether generation because no one pays us a lot of attention, right? We're small. The generations after us definitely have it harder. But like we came of age seeing, at least on TV, if not in real life, that like nuclear family where the dad worked and could afford a home and a car and to send his kids to college on one income. And he wasn't like rich, but there was a solid middle class. You had a pension, so you could retire. And that was the way life worked. Reagan kind of killed the whole pension thing back in the 80s. We were too young to really realize the impact that would have. That like we have, I mean, some Gen X people I'm sure are fine financially, but I have to think the bulk of us are really having a hard, before the last week in the stock market crash, even like we're the first generation that lacks stability in a way that generations before us had of like, well, you had a pension and you could count on Social Security and like you weren't going to be wealthy in your retirement necessarily, but you weren't panicked about what happens next. And layered over that at the same time, because jobs are so technical now, and there's such an age bias in hiring and in employment, we're getting pushed out of the workforce way earlier. And we're not prepared financially, even if we were to work until we're, 65 or
Right.
so. So from a career perspective, the Gen Xy people, like I'm carrying the metaphor through from that article. He compared us to candlesticks
That was
in the
very hard
age
here.
of electricity.
Electricity.
And Lawrence and I, when we did our podcast about it, we were like, we built the electrical grid, you
Yeah.
asshole. I love candles. I've got some burning. Don't get me
Right.
wrong.
We built Google. I mean, Gen X
Yes.
built Google. Gen X built all these platforms that we're all using and talking about. So to make us sound like we were somehow like left behind and everything just, like we got caught with our pants down and we were making
Right.
candles while in an electrical world. I was very surprised that he said that. That was so tone deaf and off. I just felt like
Yes.
that was completely off. So that is definitely something that really, I think, struck a chord with a lot of people, which is why my response to his article and the responses to my response were all pretty universally like,
Right?
F this guy. We are adaptable. We are the people that created this stuff. And it's terrible
Yes.
PR for us because I think it,
That's
I hate
the hardest part.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest part because I hate that the New York Times, which still has influence, even though probably less and less as the years
It's still
go.
big.
It's still big, right?
Big. Yeah.
And I've written for the New York Times, and I still like writing for the New York Times because whenever I write for the New York Times, people actually read the article, and it's like that's the kind of thing my parents, like they see it and like their friends see it, and so it has import. But when they start making these declarations that Gen X is dead and like started writing our obituary, which is basically what he did, it has impacts. It's like when you're looking for a job, people think, well, oh God, well, Gen X doesn't like this. And a lot of millennials don't even feel like they know who Gen X is. Like you said, we're sort of a little bit forgotten. Like
Right.
they
We're just
talk
called
about
boomers.
right?
Yes.
But we're not boomers. And somebody, I think Gene said that we are the middle children. We're like the middle children of
We are the
generation.
Jan Brady's.
We are the Jan Brady's, right?
100%.
We are.
Yeah.
It's so accurate. Like the boomers were the older child, and the millennials and Gen Z are the younger kids, and we just somehow we are the smallest generation. I mean, just in terms of numbers, but we got forgotten, and it's important. I feel like for us to kind of say we're still here. We did a lot of amazing things, and still do a lot of amazing.
And we're still doing them. That's the thing. Like,
Right.
I mean, I'm sure there are some folks in Gen X who helped build the grid, and then we're like, peace out.
Right,
Especially
right.
if they weren't really, made a lot of money building the initial electrical grid, to carry through that metaphor. But those of us, it is so hard to work in tech as an older, especially woman, I think, though
Yeah,
I'm sure it's
I'm
both.
amazed that you're in there, and I mean, I'm not even amazed. I mean, you're obviously incredibly smart and stuff, but
Thanks.
it's impressive. Like that you.
I always feel like any minute this is going to be.
And do you find yourself somebody's lying about how old you are? Like I personally do. Like I don't bring it up, and then I'll say like, well, I'm a little older than you. I'll make like a little joke about it because everybody I work with is like 20 years younger than me, pretty much.
Same. Everyone is as well. I don't lie about my age. I tell the people who I know well. I hold it as a source of pride, and I'm especially other women. I'm like, you need to see that there's a 54-year-old woman like here doing the fucking work, right? And I think so. Back in 2018, I worked for a company that was a really foolish decision. They went under. Everyone knew they were going to go under. Long story, but I'd never had a hard time finding a job before. So I got laid off along with the rest of the marketing team. And I was like, whatever, I'll pick something up. I had 14 full interview loops over 5.5 months till I finally got a yes. And it was starting to get to the point where I was like, am I going to have to sell my house and move? Like, am I going to have to downgrade my whole professional way of being in my life because I don't know if I can get hired anymore? And it wasn't for lack of being qualified. Like, I got in the door, I got past the phone screens, but when I showed up, and this was pre-pandemic, so it was in person, the person who hired me was my age. Every job I have ever been hired for since my 40s, if there wasn't someone at least 40 years old on that loop,
Right.
I did not get
Yeah.
hired. And Lawrence, my counterpart, has been unemployed now for 9 months and is just having
And he is, I think I
time of it.
recall he had been working at Amazon. He's had some big corporate.
Amazon, Microsoft,
Yeah.
all the big ones out here. Yeah. So he has immense experience. He's so qualified, so smart, and is just, we know so many people like this now, increasingly, who are like, damn, I haven't worked in a year. This hasn't happened. In my mind, I'm like, wow, when if I do lose this job, would I ever get hired for another full-time job. And when the New York Times runs a story like this and is like, I show up for an interview and they're like, you're a candlestick.
Yeah.
I mean, already, if I go to like
Hard enough.
the Genius Bar at Apple and I'm like, my phone is doing this, they're like, have you tried turning it on and off, ma'am? And I'm like, don't turn it on and off, ma'am, me, please.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
but I understand why they're doing it. The biases are there. And
Biases, and also, so why the New York Times wrote it. I mean, the thing is, I made this joke in my article that I kind of was annoyed about the article, but also that I hadn't written it myself, because I've been talking about this incessantly with my friends, because everybody that I know has either been laid off or is starting to think about this. But it's not because we're being passed because we don't know, we're obsolete. Like, that's not what my concern was. My concern was we're just at that place in our lives, when you're in your mid 50s, where you're starting to think about like, okay, like act 3, like how does this all end? Like, when do I actually have to stop working? Right. Like, I know that's 10 years away from me, but I'm just starting to think about it now. My kids are in college. I'm about to become, thanks. Well, I shouldn't say my kids. My kid is in college. My other daughter is a freshman in high school. So I still have time, but we're going to be empty nesters at some point, my wife and I. And I don't remember my dad. My dad didn't live to be past 63, very sadly. So they didn't really have that experience. But I even have some friends that are already kind of semi-retired, which makes me incredibly jealous. But I'm I think we're all taking inventory now, and we're sort of seeing like the world is. And so I think that's kind of where this angst is coming. It's not because we feel like we're obsolete and can't get it. I mean, and so I just felt like it was kind of calling out the wrong thing. There is concern, but everybody is concerned. Every generation is concerned about finding work right now. It's not unique to us. I have millennial friends that are terrified. I'm here in Hollywood, so you can only imagine. I mean, tech and Hollywood are probably the two worst right now in terms of just job loss and people being laid off, and it's just it's a nightmare.
It is.
So there is panic across the generations. I didn't like being singled out in that way. Go ahead. Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Okay. There were elements of his story that really resonated.
Of course.
And I'm not coming down on, I'm sorry, I should have looked up the author's name.
I forgot. And I feel like I should know this guy because he says that he was in magazines, which I was, but I think he's a little bit younger than us. I think he's like...
Yes, he was 76, I think.
Yeah.
So a little younger than us.
What is his name? I'm sorry. Well, I say it in the... Stephen Kuritz.
That's right.
Kuritz, yeah.
I loved the intro, first of all. The song was perfect, and it was beautifully done. What he described in that story so his story was a subset of, I was like, we're the minority of the minority.
Right,
Gen
it's
X.
a creative.
This is an even bigger subset, right? These are people who work in creative fields and
mainly on the
really
East Coast.
hone a craft, who now their craft is disappearing because of technology, because of AI, because influencers can do it. Like, nobody cares about the perfection of a $50,000 photo shoot. They're like, an influencer can do it with their iPhone. And he spoke of an ethos of, that, like I alluded to earlier, of Gen X more than any other generation had this sense of like, we can't sell out. That further harms us. And what I said when I talked about this on my podcast with Lawrence was, I completely, like, to my bones, feel what he's talking about and know the people he's talking about. And also, I have never had the luxury or allowed myself the luxury to live like that. Like, I'm just a pragmatist at heart. And I think a lot of us are. We are like resourceful and like pragmatic is the word that came to mind of like, yeah. I would love to write about my precious little indie music website all day, every day. I've got a mortgage.
Yeah. Responsible. Yeah. And we've raised good kids, and I think we're responsible and we're very resourceful. I think that was a word that I kind of came up with, like, that came to me. And I don't, all these people that are complaining to me, they're nervous, but they know they're going to be fine. Like, they kind of know, like I said, it's the end of work as we know it. He says that, but that song, the end of the song says, but I'll be fine. But I feel fine.
And he says, and we're not fine.
And we're not fine.
To start his article.
Right, which is not really the way I feel. I feel like we all have this angst. I think it's part of being human. And then I kind of wanted to, and I'm very curious to hear your take, how I've figured this out in my own career, because I am exactly who he is talking about. I mean, literally, he could have just interviewed me for that story. He is talking about I grew up in New York City. I worked at 10 different magazines. I worked my way up from an editorial assistant to an executive editor at many different magazines. Many of my listeners are probably sick of hearing these stories. Like, oh, I was a Glamour magazine, in the heyday, whatever. I was there, those tame, like that kind of Sex in the City era of the 90s when magazines ruled New York. And I knew that this wasn't going to last forever. I think we all kind of did. But, what are you going to do when you're making some money and you're writing and having a glamorous, kind of somewhat glamorous career? It was never really glamorous, but it felt, kind of cool to tell people what I did for a living.
You did what I wanted to do. I was like,
well, you could have done it. I just happened to do
editor
it.
of my high school newspaper and applied to Northwestern's journalism school and got waitlisted and didn't get in, and went to University of Florida and started journalism and was like, I don't have the courage to do this. And so I majored in something really stable and grounded.
Right.
And this is my renaissance. This is my
Well, you found it later.
Yeah.
But what you're doing is kind of what I tell my friends, where it's like, first of all, don't expect your next thing you do to be like the huge moneymaker, because that's not going to be, it probably isn't. But just do like a bunch of different things that you've wanted to do, and just have a lot of different kind of streams of revenue. That's kind of what I'm doing now. I don't know if if this is sustainable. It feels sustainable right now because I'm able to afford, to still live in LA, which is insanely expensive place to live. I don't know why I live
Seattle. I hear you.
Right, exactly. To have my, one kid in private school, the other one in college. I mean, there's a lot of expense. I've got to pay now my own insurance because you have a day job, right? So thankfully they pay for insurance. But I lost my day job last year, and so now I have to pay insurance. But I'm cobbling it together. Like there's like a podcast company. There's there's teaching. There's just a lot of ways. You just have to be creative. So anyway,
that's part of. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Finish.
No, I just think that there's but I do think that generally the people I speak to, they do go through a minute of, and we're tired. It's like when you're in your 50s, it's kind of like, okay, do I kind of keep having to hustle? Like, how long am I gonna have to hustle? I thought this period was done, and you're like, I'm hustling more now and I'm making less money. I'm hustling more.
Am I done yet?
Yeah.
Am I done yet?
I want to be done. If I wrote a book about this, I would probably say, like, are we done yet? Like, when is this done?
And are we there yet?
Frankly, I don't think any of us really know how this is going to play out, because it does feel a bit unprecedented that, like,
yes,
we don't have enough money. I mean, he says this in the article. We don't really have enough money in our 401ks. We can't even tap into them until we're like 65 or whatever. And then it's not quite enough. And Social Security certainly might not even be around by the time we get to be 65. And so, yeah.
Hey, the rate we're going, our 401ks might not be around.
I wonder.
After a week,
I know at this point, I don't even want to look.
And now we have a lunatic in charge as we're coming of late age. It's
scary. And then we have AI. I mean, the existential threats facing all of us, but it feels particularly, I guess, poignant for Gen X is it's terrifying. And yet I feel like if there was a generation I would rely on to be able to sort of figure this out, it would be our generation.
That was the part that was hard to read. It was the whole like, oh, well, I guess you're just going to be candlesticks forever. And it's like,
or now I'm going to be a therapist. Yeah.
When I went to college, I literally typed my papers on a fucking typewriter. Like and it was a long time ago, but like not that long ago. It's my adult lifetime and yours that we have been through so much, and we have adapted, and like we know our shit. That sense of that ethos didn't come through in the story at all. And I would have really enjoyed the story, I think, in total, if there had been both sides of it, and the art, and it hadn't been just oh, poor Gen X, they're done and they're not ready to be done, but they're done.
Yeah. It felt very defeatist, and
it did.
And I don't like that out there, because I do think that taints the way people think about us. And
that's why we're here, right?
Yeah, and there probably is. I mean, it's interesting. One of the people quoted in that story got back to me on she read my Substack. She was a little bit offended that I called them grumpy Gen Xers. And I was like, I'm sorry, I didn't actually think anybody that was in the story would read my story, since they felt bad.
This was the woman who had the agency called Geezer, right?
Geezer, yes.
I saw she commented, because Lawrence and I on our podcast were like, fuck you for naming your company
Probably
Geezer.
shouldn't have had a geezer. I might still have her on my pod, so I'm not going to say anything bad about her.
Yeah.
Listen, I give
You
her
can take
credit.
that part out.
No, it's fine. I give her credit for, so basically she's in Minneapolis. She started an ad agency yeah, that hires Gen Xers. That apparently it's called Geezer something, and which is not a great name, not good PR. I don't know why she would do that, but anyway, I'll ask her that question if I have her on the podcast. She claims that she talked to this writer for like 2 hours and that she wasn't crazy about what he took away from that interview. And it kind of reminds me, I mean, so I also posted this story on a website group that I'm in, a Facebook group that I'm in called After Magazines. And you can only imagine what After Magazines is. It's basically a bunch of
Oh,
former
yes.
me's, many of us, mainly women. I think because the woman who started was from a women's magazine, but I worked in women's magazines for a long time, so I know a lot about women's magazines. And yeah, they were just so outraged by this story. And they said, well, they can only imagine when it was a sign because we talk about trend stories and like if you go into a story going, with basically a point of view, and that this point of view is the point of view that he had, that we're kind of becoming obsolete and people don't know what to do and they're in a state of panic, and then you're going to tell that story, and that's the story that he told. And you're right, he could have told a little bit more of a balanced story.
He absolutely could have. And it's reminding me, as we're talking about when I first started writing on Medium a little over almost 2 years ago now, one of my first articles was a retort to the New York Times also. I didn't look it up before this, so it's a little bit hazy, but it was about women in the workplace and menopause. And like they interviewed these women who were like, oh, the brain fog, I'm miserable, and oh, I'm so stupid at work. They never mentioned HRT, hormone replacement therapy.
Right.
They never talked about how women are like raising our kids, working big jobs, keeping our shit together in spite of these things. And I was like, again, you have just made this so much harder for women who are older in the workplace.
There's also, and
what are you doing?
What are you doing? And also, like, he was talking, it was kind of weird because he was coming from the point of view of, I mean, he was saying, legacy media is dead and all these jobs. And meanwhile, he's writing for legacy media, like as a full timer. He wasn't even a freelancer. He's like on staff. I've written for the style section as a freelancer. It doesn't pay well. You cannot make a living writing for the style section. It's nice. Again, it's nice to get the byline. But
I love a New York Times byline.
Of course, it's wonderful.
I pitched Modern Love twice.
Yeah, Modern Love is tough. I've
given
had
up.
Dan Jones, the editor of Modern Love, on my podcast to talk about. I mean, it is
Have you?
very hard to get on there, and I don't think I could get a Modern Love, and I've I used to write advice columns for Glamour magazine. I mean, it is tricky, especially these days.
Especially now, because now it seems like it's mostly celebrities.
Wow, have they changed?
Yeah.
I kind of stopped
Yeah.
reading it after a while because
I stopped listening to the podcast because it used to just be the story and an actor
right.
voicing it, and now it's a lot of like, tell me why you wrote the story. Instead, it's at least when I've tuned in, I've just been like, I don't care, I just want to hear the story.
Yeah.
And
So
then
anyway,
maybe I'll want to know more.
So he was kind of saying that all, these legacy things, and meanwhile he's writing for one of them. I don't know. Again, I don't want to come down on this guy because he's a good writer, and he was on to something. There is definitely a zeitgeist feeling among our generation right now of existential dread and doom. I just don't know if it's unique to our generation. I mean, I think millennials, Gen Z, my son, he's 19, he's only a freshman, but he's a musician. Yes. I mean, what is he going to do? He's an amazing musician, and
my children are artists. I hear you.
Yeah,
Great
your children are artists too. Yeah, so my son is an artist. He didn't have a chance. I mean, that was what he always wanted to be, and he's always loved music. And so I worry for him, but he doesn't seem But I know that he's got his own things that he's going to be up against, and then all these millennials that I work with, they just complain to me all the time and how nervous they are about trying to keep up, and they're exhausted and burnt out. And so anyway, we're all there. I don't know why you single us out.
Yeah.
In some ways, they have it worse.
They have it worse, but we are the bellwether generation. That's what I see it as. Of like, we were the turning point, and where we go, they're going to follow, and worse. But we're the first
casualties.
We're the first generation of. We're getting pushed out. We have no stability. We're getting pushed out, and we don't have the money to be pushed out because we don't have pensions.
Right.
And we're probably not going to have Social Security either. Like, literally, what's going to happen?
So you have a
So
full-time job, right? So you,
I do.
this is your, and you've had it for a while, the same job. And
Well, more or less. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there are less and less of you, right? Like a lot of people had that. I wasn't that guy until last January, and all of a sudden I lost my full-time job. And it was like, people would say, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And I was like, in some ways it was kind of a relief because I was always so worried I was going to get fired from that job anyway, or laid off,
Yeah.
not fired, because I could see the writing on the wall. Again, it was for a media company, and I could see that they were making cuts and that I was probably too highly paid for what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And the project they had brought me on ended up disappearing. So
Yeah.
suddenly I was kind of just on staff because they didn't know what to do with me, and they're giving me a lot. And I kept trying to figure out in my Gen X-y way, duct tape, trying to figure out how to make myself valuable to this company and volunteering to do things. I'm going to become your AI king. I'm going to just try a million things, throwing everything at them. Like, I'll do this, I'll do that, because I could see. So when they finally laid me off, I was at one point completely freaked out, but then kind of like relieved because it's like all I ever worried about was getting that call. And then it finally came, and I was like, oh, okay, here it is.
Yeah. I'm like
So
that
do you think about that? Like, if you were,
every day.
and I don't want to think about, but you think about
Literally
what
every
would I
day.
do? What would I
Every
do
day.
if I lost this job?
Well, it's so interesting. Like I said, I've only been writing, on Medium and now on Substack it's been a little under 2 years, and I just got to Substack and started podcasting last month. But it is like once I got on Medium and like the first day I earned 39 cents, and I was like, oh my God,
You
my
make money
writing 39 cents. And then it quickly became like a legit revenue stream. And I was like, I never want to be dependent on only a job because I don't even want to say this out loud to make it come true, but every day I fear it's going to go away, and then I will never get hired for another one in my field. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope I will not get laid off. I hope that there will be always opportunity for me as long as I need to work. But if not, I'm going to be doing what you're doing. And here's a really, can I layer onto this a conversation Lawrence and I have had privately, but we haven't even talked about on Gen X yet.
Wow, you heard it here first.
Yeah, you're hearing it here first. And I tend to do this in my memoir writing and also when I talk of like disparate pieces coming together. But another thing that's happening to Gen X, we talked about all the career things, the no pension, the Social Security probably going away, the ageism pushing us out of the workplace. Lawrence and I are both single, and he is a gay man, and Gen X, he's going to talk a lot about what changed for Gen X in his lifetime from being a closeted kid in high school because there were no queer kids and watching all his elders die of AIDS to then seeing the kids younger than him get on PrEP and have marriage equality and knowing it may all be rolled back with this administration. That's going to be fascinating to explore. Being married, being in partnership is another form of stability, right? One of you loses a job, the other has the health insurance maybe, or you're figuring it out, right? At least of the Gen Xy people I know, the urban folks in the city, so many of the women are like me and we're single. Some have just stopped dating altogether. I have dated some, but we have no peer group. And I alluded to this earlier when we were messaging of like, there's a huge exploration of non-monogamy, which is again new to Gen X, and those of us who are keeping up know about it, know it's there. Some are opting in. Not my thing. Know a lot about it, but it's not my thing. But the men in particular, if they are men worth like the men who I see online, who I'm like, that looks like a guy who's like attractive, bright, seems to have his, creative, interesting, almost universally are not interested in partnership. And some of the ones who I've talked to and some friends of mine, I'm like, what's your exit strategy, dude? You need a partner if you ever want to not have to work or not be like literally destitute. Some of them where I'm like, my practical brain works that way of like, well, wow, if I had someone who was doing about as well as I am, we'd be in really good shape. And I'm ready to start planning what's coming next, right? Like my kids are in high school. I love living in Seattle. There's things that are really good here, but I'm like, well, what I could, right. At our age, you're starting to look ahead and be like,
where am I
I'm not going to be working forever. And how do I want my lifestyle to look? How much do I want to travel? How much Like,
Right.
hopefully we get to live long and healthy later lives. And I don't see male counterparts hardly who want to do that.
Hmm.
And it may just be, again, this is my narrow view, and I haven't fully
And it could
baked
be
this into a
a
story yet.
Seattle thing or a kind of a coastal thing.
I think it's an urban thing.
Urban thing.
So it's a Gen Xy thing, right? But it's yet another way in which we are less stable than our parents before us. Well, I mean, a lot of them divorced too, but
But they always had second marriages.
they did. They had second marriages,
Right.
and I
All
know
my
very
friends' parents were divorced, but they were always in second marriages. They were never
yes.
single.
And
Yeah.
I don't see that happening so much now.
Right.
I guess maybe the bigger cultural thing is like with the presumption of partnership and monogamy pulled off the table in these areas, there's good in it, I'm sure, but there's also instability in it. So it's just another example of how we are entering our late middle life even less stable than folks before us. And, millennials and Gen Zs, I mean, everything is destabilized in that area for them who
Yeah.
it's all more and bigger and more. So Gen X gets ignored, but again, we're the first, and we're
Yeah, we're
about to come of an age where it's like we don't have a social safety net in the United States.
Yeah.
Literally, what's going to happen?
That is, and I think that was a legitimate concern that he brought up in that story. And that's why when I first started reading that story, I thought that was more what it was going to be about like, what are we going to do? Because we, like you said, we're the bellwether generation. He said, I don't know if he said in the article, but actually if you go online and look at there's a version of the story that you can listen to. And he had
Yes.
that preamble where he
I listened
talked
to that.
about, yeah, which was really interesting. And I think at one point he does talk about that we have terrible timing. Like that somehow we are kind of we've always had the worst timing. And so yes, like suddenly we're coming to time of retirement where we're supposed to be retiring, where, there's all this uncertainty and we don't have enough money saved up and there's no pensions and, we don't even know if we're going to have Social Security in 10 years. I mean, all these things. And, I get it. Look, it's not that I wake up and not, that I wake up every morning. I'm just so happy and feeling like everything is going so great in my life. I mean, I'm a neurotic Jew from New York, but I have the one thing I can tell
From
people.
a long line of those, so I knew that already.
Okay, good. Well, one thing I can tell people, because I kind of live the nightmare. Like I actually, the thing that I feared the most actually happened to me, which is I'm going to lose this stable job and my insurance, and I'm going to have to fend for myself yet again. This has now happened to me 4 times in my career. I had never been laid off in my life until I was, I think, 42 years old. And then all of a sudden I just kept getting laid off, and had nothing to do with me.
Yep, never does.
It always had to do with the company bringing me in to start a new project, because I was often put into new projects like starting a new website. I mean, I came to the Game Show Network and I was brought on to start a whole new division at the Game Show Network of shows that would appeal to the YouTube generation, right? So yeah, and it was a great job, and I had a little team, and we creatives, and we made all these game shows, and we had a budget, but the Game Show Network wasn't ready to do that project, and so they basically did it for 2 years. We're excited about it when I first started, and then when they realized they couldn't make any money off of it, they got rid of me, and that happens to me a lot, like where they bring on a new project. A legacy company brings me into it to kind of do something new, and then they were like, we can't afford this, and I become sort of the first casualty of. But listen, I've lived this nightmare a few times, and I am here to say, as somebody who's lived the nightmare, that in some ways, not getting that new full-time job has actually been a blessing for me, because it has forced me to be very resourceful. And I've, started my own company, which I never probably would ever have done if I had my own job. I wrote a book, which I would never have had time to do. And it's been hard as hell, but it has also been incredibly rewarding. So I don't want people who are listening to this to get totally freaked out. If I lose my job, my whole life is going to be over, including Dana Dubois, because you're obviously very gifted and smart. You might not make your living being a writer on Substack, but you're going to find something that kind of maybe hits a little bit more of your passion. And again, I don't know what your actual full-time job, maybe that's a real passion project for you. But by the way, you are a marketing expert, clearly. So that is, I mean, I could use you. Like I need I'm terrible at marketing.
Really?
I took a mark. I will. I am so bad. I mean, not so bad, but I'm not it doesn't come naturally to me. I'm not a good, bragger. I'm not the kind of guy that's going to go on TikTok and like do my own kind of like things. And it's just not a part of me. And I haven't figured out. I have a lot of things to market, and I've just never been great at marketing them. But everybody, when they find me, they're like, "I like your stuff," But it's like, well, but how do I get it to you, if you like? So anyway, your skill set as a marketer would be incredibly valuable to so many people in my generation. So anyway, just a little word of like,
and my generation too.
Yeah, exactly. And of your generation. Oh yeah, by the way, we share generations. I still keep thinking you're much younger than me.
I am not.
I know.
It's
but
the hair. The hair makes me look younger.
The hair, yeah. And the cool glasses.
Thank you.
All right.
Cool glasses too.
Thanks. So okay. So where do you see yourself in 5 years? I mean, where do you see in your ultimate fantasy of like how this all plays out? I mean, you're still in Seattle? Maybe you found a nice guy. Maybe he's not even be Gen X, since they're all kind of douchey anyway, apparently. But maybe you're looking at the wrong generation. Maybe you should be looking at a boomer or a millennial.
No boomers.
No boomers. Yeah, boomers are not my type. No. I don't get along with millennials always. So no. I must say, I actually get along with Gen Z better than millennials, maybe because they're my kids.
I have a theory, again, not fully fleshed out yet, because my kids are Gen Z as well, that there's like a Gen X, Gen Z connection. There's a similar sense of irony and dark humor.
Yeah, for sure.
The millennial generation is very earnest.
Yeah,
right?
They are.
My kids eye roll with the best of them.
Yeah.
So there is, it may just be my kids with me.
No, I'm the same way. I mean, my daughter particularly, my son is great, but I'm spending so much time with my daughter now because my son is away in college in London, so he's not exactly nearby.
Ooh.
Yeah. So my daughter, she's hilarious, and she has such a good sense of humor and like such a funny perspective, and the way she sees kind of like the world, and the way even her people in her generation talk, and the kind of funny language that they use, or unusual language they use. So anyway, she's just funny. And again, maybe we just have funny kids, but I think that's really interesting. I do find a real more of a connection with Gen Z than I do with millennials. Maybe it's because they're our kids, but
yeah, I work with mostly millennials, I think, and I really enjoy them. But it's all,
yeah.
One-offs.
Right.
Who knows?
It's one-offs, right.
I think this is another attribute of like Gen X people is we know how to code switch because we are around multi-generational people. We're not just hanging out with people our own age and our kids. We mostly in the workplace probably, but some socially as well. Like we span generations. So there is a sense of code switching. Like I worked with some people a couple jobs ago where everybody was way younger than me. And when we would use Slack to talk to one another, like no one used end punctuation. Because it was that is a generational thing. And also I'm a writer. So of course I'm, persnickety about
grammar.
Yes. And sentence structure. And especially at work where like, I'm not going to be casual, but I was like, oh, got it. And you code switch. I don't, I have met people our age who will still put double spaces after a period. And I'm like, what are you doing? Don't do that. Like that went away a really long time ago.
Yeah, and that's going to really freak people out.
It's going to really freak people out.
It's going to make you seem like an old man.
Yes, but 5 years from now, that question might have been different before the last election. If I could dream state it, sure, there might be a partner involved, but yeah, it would be great to not be worrying about money and to be, but what the word that keeps coming to mind, or the phrase that keeps coming to mind, is the math isn't working right now. Like I would like to be on a 5-year exit plan, and the math doesn't work right now. And one of the means to that equation would be to have a partner, which would be potentially, it could also be a liability.
Unless you're like me and you have a partner who doesn't have any insurance either.
Right. It would, I would really like to write a book.
Fiction or nonfiction?
Nonfiction. I don't write fiction. I have talked to this one person, a consultant, about writing a book about my other publication, which is called Pink Hair and Pronouns, for parenting gender nonconforming kids. And I would love to pull together, I've been running that on Medium for a couple of years, to pull together a collection of essays and serve as sort of the editor, creative direction, and one of the writers, but to bring in multiple perspectives. That would be, that feels like a project I should be able to bring to life, but time. I
time,
love
but
to be paid to be a personality on the internet. I feel like, Three Imaginary Girls in its heyday was 2002 to 2007. We were like just pre all of that.
mhm,
But we were voted most influential in Seattle music, right?
that's
And
amazing.
yeah, if it had been, if we'd had the tools that exist now, like we would have probably become influencers of a sort.
Right.
I mean, indie music doesn't tend to be a huge moneymaker, but it's a demographic that probably, like, we would have kept writing, and we would have had social channels fired up
Do you
probably.
think
And
Gen X can be influencers? Can we? I mean, I feel like that's such a term that's kind of associated more with millennials and Gen Z, but I think
yes,
we
I
can.
think
And
we
I think
could and
places
should
like
be.
Substack, you just have to find
Yes,
the right platforms. I think
yes.
TikTok might not be, although that said, I'm sure I could go on TikTok and find some Gen X influencers, but you
I'm
know,
sure. I'm not on TikTok. I never got on it. I got as far as downloading it, and then
yeah,
I just
I'm not on it very much. This was kind of crazy. My daughter and I made a video. My daughter helped me edit it, and it went viral. And it's like, and of course, I've never hit it. It was my first one. It was about
wow.
a terrible plane ride I had from LA to New York,
Okay.
where there was three emergency landings. It was insane, but I just told the story. It was just a story. And it got like, tens of thousands of views. It was crazy. And of course, I've never been able to replicate that. So, but it got me into TikTok, and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be a storyteller in TikTok. And, all this stuff is very hard and very time consuming. But I think one of the advice I like to give to people is like, don't force it. Like, if you're not natural to TikTok and it's not something that feels, I think that's why Substack resonates with us, because it does actually feel like it's age appropriate and kind of like, I like it. Like,
It's
I don't have to,
brainier.
yeah, it's brainier.
I you said I think you said something before about authenticity. Authenticity is a real Gen X attribute, right? Like that was part of the ethos he was speaking about. And I don't want, if I have to pander even on Substack to be like, why is nobody seeing my stuff? Click here and
Yeah.
like, I don't want to do that. I do think I have marketing instincts, but they have to be authentic.
Hmm.
And when it comes to storytelling and finding community, like those are my strong suits. Amusingly, since Medium started its downward spiral, whatever it's doing right now, and I've come onto Substack, I have done almost no memoir writing, which is like my true passion and what I love doing. But my time has its limits, and getting ramped up on Substack has been a very full-time job. And I'm saying yes to everything. Like when you're like, you want to get on this podcast? I'm like, right now, let's just do it.
You
And
should. Well, eventually you'll have
yeah.
a plan, but I'm glad you're doing this. So now this is actually a good time for us to say, where can people find you?
Oh, well, thanks. I am Dana Dubois. You can find me on Medium. You can find me on Substack. I have written for today.com. I've written in Business Insider, a few
And what do you like to
Parent
write about? Because I know you like to write about, you mentioned a few things that you're writing about these days.
Yeah, this is the one of the concerns I have about Substack is it seems like the people who do best are super niche.
Hmm.
And if I have, some people are like, I'm intentionally nicheless, and that's sort of true. But
Yeah.
Gen Xy, when Lawrence and I founded this, that really, like, at the end of the day, I am a liberal word nerd with a Gen X perspective on culture, parenting, and music. Sometimes all at the same, and relationships, whether they be trying to date relationships or family relationships. And so I bring elements of all of that into my writing, but my, yeah, I really love music memoir writing. I've written a few stories that are sort of music reviews, but I don't write music reviews like this record has a syncopated blah blah blah. Like that's not my thing. I'm not a musician, but how, like, what the experience is like of being at a live show, or what music, like, I have one of my favorite stories, was one of my earliest ones, that's called In Between Days, my 35-year love affair with The Cure. And it's like
Well,
chronicling how
we
it's
both share that love.
in, yes, how it, like, it sort of time shifts through all of these touch points in my life when The Cure was there, and it ends at the Cure show that my and their dad and I all went to see together.
Was that up in Seattle? Because I saw The Cure at the Hollywood Bowl, which was incredible, but Robert Smith, like, he kind of hid the whole time. It was the most bizarre thing. He was very, I think, sort of, he didn't want the camera on him. And
Yes,
I was
same.
so far away that it was hard to see him a little bit.
I
mean,
think
music
he's self-conscious about
very
it.
self-conscious about how he looks, but he shouldn't be because he's the greatest. But anyway, if
He
you're
is.
listening, Robert,
We love you.
we love you.
How many, like, Gen X, we lose all our heroes, right? They either kill themselves
A lot
or
of
they
them have
become right-wing assholes.
That is
like,
so interesting. I hadn't thought about that as true. I
Yes,
mean, a
we
lot of
lose
them
our
have died.
heroes.
I mean, if you think of like in music, like we've lost Kurt Cobain and then Notorious B.I.G. and all these guys that were like
Elliott Smith.
Elliott Smith, yeah,
There's so many. And
Amy Winehouse. Yeah, I mean, there's been many.
I don't think we can, I love Amy Winehouse.
oh,
and
we
I've
can't
written
claim
about
her, right?
We cannot claim her. She was
Okay, I'm going to take that out. We can't say Amy Winehouse. I was trying to think of a woman, but I'm sure we've lost women. I just can't think of one right now.
One of the women in Hole, but that she wasn't like a huge cultural
One of-
impact.
yeah.
I'm trying.
Wasn't
Yeah,
Courtney.
weird. I can't.
We have, but I can't. I mean, I actually feel like I was in this book. Anyway, if you know of a woman who died, please
Gen
write
X
us.
woman who rock
Who is
star.
who's a pop star or an act? Oh, like something like Brittany Murphy or,
She's
I mean,
millennial.
she is.
I think so. Clueless is like a millennial. I mean, we
Yeah.
loved it too, but well, that's an interesting
It's
question.
more of a millennial thing.
So-
we're more Fast Times at Ridgemont High. That was more our
Yes.
seminal movie.
Well, so here's the thing, because I was talking. So Lawrence and I, when you come on our podcast next, we ask every guest. We've only had one guest so far, but we're going to ask every guest, what is the most Gen X-y song in your mind? And it's a really so we had to talk first
I have
together,
to think about that.
where we were like, well, what makes a song a Gen X song? And did you hear it when you were a little kid? Did you hear it when you were a young adult? And in my mind, it has to be a song that resonates with Gen X in a way that either other generations don't know it or it doesn't hit the same way. So like Smells Like Teen Spirit can't be that song because that spans generation. That's impacted for so long.
It had to be unique too.
Yes,
I have
but-
one. I have a funny one.
What's
It
yours?
could be Free to Be You and Me. Do you remember?
Right. Yes.
Because every kid knows
Well,
that song.
every
from the
kid
street.
of the old, I was even like, I barely remember it.
Okay.
So that was
Right.
an older
That
Gen
was
X.
that was
thing.
that's a late '60s,
Yes.
early '70s thing.
With
But
our-
yeah, what was the song that you and Lauren? I'm curious what the song
Well,
is.
we keep naming more and more. We're going to make like a playlist.
Yeah,
but our
it's
first
great.
guest who was on was Frederick Pogue, who we adore, political guy on Substack. I don't know if you follow him, but he was born in '77. So,
Mm-hmm.
and to him, he was like, I don't think of '80s music as Gen X. It's '90s music. And I was
that's
like,
interesting.
So he picked "Linger" by the Cranberries, and I was like, okay,
That's a Clueless song, right? Or like Clueless is Cranberries because he talks about the Cranberries.
yeah, I don't think they played the song in it, but.
Yeah, no, but
then
that's
he also referenced "Ask" by the Smiths, and I was like, that one's perfect.
Well, the Smiths is perfect to
Yes.
me. Yeah, I think How Soon Is Now to me is a very has a
Very
tremendous
Gen X.
Gen X vibe to it.
The weird one that came to me, there were several that hit me first, and my favorite one, though it probably won't count because not all Gen Xers know this, you have to be a certain kind of Gen X, "Birdhouse in Your Soul" by They Might Be Giants.
Oh, wow.
That
Okay.
song like hits really hard for me, and it's weird, and I went to see them a couple years ago here in Seattle, and I went with Liz, my founder in Three Imaginary Girls, my co-founder, who loves They Might Be Giants even more than I do, and we were like, I was like, oh my God, these are all Gen X gifted kids.
Yeah.
This is the whole audience, like a very specific kind of Gen X. "Tainted Love," I would say, is like,
Incredibly good song. In fact, I just was listening to that very
Yeah.
recently, which is funny that it just came on. I
Or
mean,
it's
don't you forget
suggested-
about me?
yep, don't you, "Sunglasses at Night."
Oh, yeah.
You only Gen X knows that song, right?
Right. Although, he brought it, what was that? God, why am I thinking? The two black comedians that do the funny, he makes scary movies. Why can't I think of his name?
Jordan Peele?
Jordan Peele
I love him.
did the Sunglasses at Night kind of cover in the latest movie. There was a whole like creepy Sunglasses at Night. Yeah.
Okay, good to
Which
know.
is interesting that he brought that in. Anyway, that is, and I have to think of some hip hop stuff because hip hop,
Yes.
that's the other thing where it's like I grew up. So I was a DJ. I was really into DJing and still am, and was very into hip hop and grew up in New York City. So kind of like loved that whole era and was, and you know, to me, like a lot of the Gen X stuff that I like in hip hop is from the 80s. And it's like Eric B and Rakim and all this stuff. And even Sugar Hill Gang, like Rapper's
Yes,
Delight.
Rapper's Delight.
Right? It's like
Iconic.
amazing. But I bet the guy you had on would think of more like Tribe Called Quest, and he would be like more like 90s hip hop stuff. Like,
Right, which I think of
Public Enemy.
as
Yeah.
leaning a little more millennial, but it's
Yeah.
really hard to say.
I think those guys are Gen X. I'd have to look at their birth.
Right, is it the age of the performers or where
Yeah.
it hit
Yeah.
you?
When it hit. Right. Yeah. No, I agree.
Those are different things. So
Right.
you could define it a lot of different
Well,
ways.
if anybody's listening to this, if anybody's listening, people who are listening to this, write me, and I'm going to write a Substack. I think that's a great, actually, no, I won't take your idea, but that's a great Substack post about like what is the most definitive.
It's coming. I mean, the end of the world as we know it is
That's a
REM
good
in
one.
general. Like they're making a bit of a comeback now because the book is out and everything. But like my kids, they either I have introduced them to or their dad, or more commonly, like they find music from like my daughter, my eldest, found The Cure and the Smiths on her own and loves them.
I love that. My kids are exactly the same way.
Yeah, but
They find it online, and yeah.
REM never like they've never found REM, and that voice, like I hear Michael Stipe's voice and it's like I am teleported back in time.
Yeah. He really,
there's
yeah,
a
is
really
something
good
about
argument
him
for them. And
for sure.
but you could go one hit wonder like my friend suggested
Gary
99 yeah, Gary Newman Cars, 99 Love Balloons, like the whole
Yeah.
Cold War thing.
Yeah, that's true. And then there's just 80s songs I didn't even necessarily like in the 80s that I love now. Like I like that song "It's My Life" by Talk Talk.
Yeah.
I don't even remember liking that song.
Except Gwen Stefani covered it. So.
Yeah, then she covered it, and she kind of, no offense, Gwen, because she's kind of a neighbor. I've seen her in the playground. This is a LA thing where I've seen her in my playground.
Right.
All right, this has been a great conversation. We'll wrap it up because it's nighttime here, and we're Gen X, and we need to go to sleep.
Yeah, there's I haven't even had dinner yet.
I haven't either. I can smell there's pizza outside my door, and it's making me crazy because my kids got pizza for dinner. All right, Dana, it's been wonderful to meet you. Until we meet again, I'm excited about coming on your podcast.
Yes, when I come back from my trip, or maybe while I'm gone, we'll schedule a time. And yes, you have to come visit us over at Gen X. So you're going to love Lawrence.
I love them already, and I know you guys have been friends since fourth grade, which is adorable. Those friends are the best friends, right? The ones you've had your whole life.
Yes.
They're the best. All right.
So great to meet
Dana
you.
Dubois of Gen Xy. Check her out, her podcast and her Substack. And
Yeah, it's genxe.io. That one we have a direct.
.io. Okay.
Otherwise, you have to, what is it, like danadubois.substack.com.
Wow. Okay.
I have Dana, I have danaduboiswrites.com.
See, that's another thing. Another marketing thing is like, how do you position I'm right about now most of the time because that's my podcast. But I decided to do small talk on Substack because I want to talk about more than just writing. I didn't want to be kind of pigeonholed as always the writing guy.
I struggle with this stuff all the time. And I finally settled as All My Little Words on Medium, which is a Magnetic Field
That's
song.
a good one.
I don't know if you know.
I don't know that song, but I love
It's my
that.
favorite.
I love that.
Someone
title.
already had it on Substack.
Damn it.
So I own the URL. If you go to allmylittlewords.com,
Right.
it's me. But then I got on Substack and was like, I can't be that. So I'm
All
just
right, well,
Dana Dubois Writes.
You'll have to find another 80s song to reference or not.
That song's from 1999.
Oh my God.
The Magnetic Fields are.
I don't know. Yeah. There comes a time in music in the later 90s where I kind of fall off. It's weird. It's like I kind of stopped listening, I guess. I don't know.
It happens.
I mean, I still, you can look behind me, there's tons of records. I listen to everything, and especially since my son is so interested in music, I know about a lot of what's going on. But you love your stuff you love from when you're younger. All right. To be continued. Thank you so much. And don't you forget about us. We are Gen X, and we're not going anywhere.